What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, I have Lisa Fancher from Frontier Records, so stay tuned for that. Please support the podcast by subscribing to it wherever you listen to it. Also, if you have the time, please like it, rate it, and review it. If you go to 185milessouth.com, there is a playlist for every episode. So, like this episode, there's a playlist built out for Lisa Fancher and Frontier Records. So check that out. There is also some 185 Miles South beanies in the store. So check that out. Grab one sooner than later if you want one, because I do not want to keep the store up for that long. If you want to go the extra mile, please go to patreon.com/185 Miles South. $1 gets you behind the paywall, and we basically do bonus episodes for every interview podcast. I have some friends on, and we discuss that podcast as well as the discography or the playlist associated with the person that was interviewed. So check that out. They are some of my favorite podcasts. And let's get on with the show.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod.
What's up?
Yeah, what's up? I got Lisa Fancher from Frontier Records, and Bedge has helped me out with the interview because he's so well prepared always. But Lisa, thanks so much for doing it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It's a nice break from just watching TV or Netflix.
Yeah, that's what's up. I got to take a break from watching 90 Day Fiancé. So this is way better.
Wow, yeah. I watched some dumb stuff, but I haven't gotten involved with that show.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's a serious brain melter.
I have.
You have too? I'm really I have a big crush on Noel Fielding, so I've watched like all of the British baking shows he's on, but now I'm just watching the ones that he's not on just because I like it. But so there
cool.
you go.
Well, to get back to start off by being on topic, Lisa, do you remember when you got into punk music and how it came across your plate?
Well, if you want to say like punk music, it was when I was in. Oh God! I mean, do you want to call the Dolls? You know, I mean, I was listening to the Dolls when I was in 8th or 9th grade when the records came out, and so I called them punk and the Stooges. I discovered Cream magazine early on when I used to be walking to junior high, so I would chase down whatever they told me I had to listen to, whether it was the Dictators or the Modern Lovers. But in terms of like really being involved as opposed to a total spectator, I started going to shows. The Mask and the Whiskey when Kim Fowley did his dumb shows and all the weird venues that everybody's played, the very first bands, the Weirdos and the Screamers and the Germs. Even the Nerves. The Nerves were there just bothering people. Yeah, they were power pop and they were fine, but they were just around in everybody's face.
Most of the people I've had on the pod so far come around like in the 80s, so they don't have the perspective on like that early scene and like the Mask and so forth. Can you kind of describe what it was like to see the Screamers or a band like that, like in 77 era there?
Well, it was funny. I went to work at a place called World of Wonder for 5 years. I was in TV, and their basement was the Mask, which I had forgotten. I didn't realize when they bought the building that was where the Mask was. Cause you went around if you know where are you, Zach?
I'm in San Diego, but I grew up in Austin.
Oh, okay. So if you know Bordner's Bar, I don't know if you know that. It's on Cherokee and Hollywood Boulevard. If you cross the street and you went in the alley, that's how you got into the Mask. And then you walked down a flight of stairs. And there was exactly one way in and one way out. And it was just horrifyingly, it was like CBGBs. Like I wouldn't go to the bathroom for hours just so that I could go somewhere else. Like I would just wait till I left because it looked like somebody blew them up. And, there's graffiti everywhere. There was like, the gnarliest couches and the shows. I don't know how to say how many people were there, 100 or 200 people maybe, but it was absolutely packed. like the walls were sweaty. And again, there was one way in and one way out. So you're hoping that you didn't die if somebody dropped their cigarette on the filthy couch. And but it was amazing. It was really remarkable. The stage was super low, so unless you were standing right against the stage, you couldn't see who was playing particularly. I tend to always at punk shows, just because you never know what's going to happen. I tend to always stood in the back just so I could see, because I'm not tall like Ben is. And
you didn't want to get a peanut.
Even what?
I was going to say you didn't want to get peanut Darby Crash to throw peanut butter on you. Right?
I didn't want any of that, but also you just could, if you're up against the stage, you were going to get kicked in the head, and that's not my favorite.
Man, tell
real quick, Ben. Did any of those bands, did you connect with them more than another one, or were you just like enthralled
I
by the
was
whole
friends
thing?
with the Screamers, Fast Freddy and I, who did Backdoor Man magazine. We saw the Screamers. I want to say it was a Cheap Trick concert, maybe. It was something that wasn't punk at all. We were just standing there. So those guys were standing there, and we're like, oh my God, those guys look amazing, because, they had spiky hair, and the only people that we'd seen really were like the Damned and Sex Pistols, on TV, from far away. So we went up to them and started talking to them. And it turns out they were really nice. They weren't like snotty or scary or anything. And I just started hanging around with the Screamers. I was acquainted with the Weirdos just because I was a fan, just because, those people didn't hang around the dressing room, and you just go up and talk to people. But yeah, a lot of the people I knew, I worked at Bomp Records, and a lot of people brought their records in. So I just, it went from, some people I was better friends with than others. When they bring their 45s or their LPs inside.
How did you end up starting your own label? How did Frontier begin? Or tell us about that. I
was working at Bomp Records, so I, that wasn't my job. I basically did mail order, but I knew how you made a record. You take Ben in the studio and you make a jacket, and Bomp was a full service, teeny tiny record label. So I just kind of had an idea in my head that I thought that it would be fun to put out a record, because I'd already done a fanzine, and I was like, maybe I'll put out a record and see what happens. So I picked a band called the Flyboys, which is kind of an obscure Frontier Records, didn't do well. And it took me maybe almost 2 years to put the record out, because I had to save up money from working at Bomp to pay for it. And I just didn't know just to make a long story short, I didn't know what was going on. I had to, master the record and create artwork, get jackets printed. So it was, it was a learning curve. So, and then that record came out in March of 1980.
But when was it recorded?
Probably like starting with the last half of like 1978. And it wasn't because it was like some Boston epic or anything. It was just that I could only get this much time. We were recording it at Leon Russell's studio in the Valley, kind of off Magnolia Boulevard. Ben will understand this. Nobody else will care. And he had a really nice, like super state of the art. He had a place where he recorded, which was a house that was kind of on Barham, but this is actually like state of the art. I don't even know how long he lived here. And Jim Mankey from Sparks was an engineer. And then a pal of mine, Scott Goddard, who of all things was the Dickies roadie. And phone. And so we would record this like after hours. Like, I got a super deal because we would start at, 10 or 11 at night and go till sunup. And then we also got a lot of free sessions because nobody even knew we were in there. So, but it just took forever. It just took ages and ages and ages. And it wasn't even like it took that many hours, but it just, it might do, something every other month, a little bit of recording. And guess who answered the phone? Johnette from Concrete Blonde. But she wasn't even in a band yet. She was just a lady that was answering the phone. So who even knew she could sing or anything? So that was really fun. But it took ages. And then when the record was finally, after all that finally came out, the band came to pick them up and they told me that they broke up. So I was like, awesome. Perfect experience.
What every label wants to hear.
Exactly.
Did you have an early mission statement with the label, or were you just going to try to put out some things you liked? Like, did you always?
Yeah, I think
were
my
you
mission
planning on it?
statement kind of became clear through the way things looked. Believe it or not, it was funny. People gave me a bunch of shit like Jack Rabbit, like it was too professional, which I thought was hysterical. Like it was too like slick, like my covers. Cause you get like, I don't know if Smoke 7 was around yet, but you get people that like hand wrote the everything and black and white, look like it was Xeroxed. And, I tried to go that extra mile and make it look good, like the Circle Jerks or whatever. And I remember Jack's a good friend of mine. I'm not ragging on him, but Jack said that the Adolescents record was overproduced. I was like, what are you talking about? We made that thing in 3 days, like 3 days in a row. Is that it?
Yeah. Was it like, noticed that like your record covers look really well done. Like there's a lot of thought put into them. And it reminds me of Danger House records. Was that kind of an early inspiration for your label? Like, or like, who was like the model? You all right there?
Trying to stop as fast as I can. Yes, Danger House was an inspiration. I knew those guys because I knew they brought their records into Bomp, and they were incredible. Like the records were incredible, but the artwork was amazing too. Like they also took it seriously. I mean, didn't have to be expensive, but it just had to look good. So Anyway, that was kind of my mission statement, but I didn't have anything like, here I am in the suburbs. At that point I hadn't moved out of my parents' house. I think I was like 20, but I was trying to save money by not having rent. So I just put it all into the records, but I just didn't want it to look crappy. That's all.
Yeah. Did you originally plan on it being a punk label, though, or did you have plans to?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's what I liked at the time. I mean, there's obviously I like all kinds of music, but I didn't have the money or the wherewithal for the late 70s stuff. Like there was just no way I could even consider doing a Weirdo single or anything. I just didn't remotely even have it together to have enough money or anything. So hardcore was happening and I was a super big fan. I would, besides all the usual bands, I went down to Cuckoo's Nest and saw the bands, and a lot of the OC bands like Middle Class opened up for the quote unquote bigger bands wherever they would play. So
I want to jump ahead just a tiny bit.
Okay.
Because you mentioned the word hardcore, and this is something that we've tried to hash out on the show before. Did you see a difference between like those first wave bands and like the younger suburban like punk hardcore scene that was going to come out that like you would do some of the records of? Like, was there a differentiation in like the way that people described them?
Well, time-wise, there was a little tiny bit of crossover between the two, like Middle Class and stuff, but the classic hardcore kind of adolescent sing-songy stuff and even Black Flag or whatever, it was just a different attitude than the LA, X or the Danger House bands. Those bands were a little bit older, and maybe they would even do like a slow song here and there, where hardcore was just, full on raging. Audience was far younger.
Was that the common vernacular, though? Would people describe them as hardcore bands?
At the time, I don't know if I used the hardcore like at that point in time. It was all just punk. But I don't recall if there was like, you used that term then, or if it was coined slightly later. I don't recall.
Tell us about Circle Jerks. So your second record is the first Circle Jerks album. What?
Right. So after the abject failure of the Flyboys record, I could have quit, or it could have just been like, it's something to do. That was a lesson learned. Those guys were shopping that record around. The Decline, I think, was already out or just about to come out, and they did not wind up on Slash. And they'd already recorded a track with Posh Boy, and they didn't like him. So the good news was that there really wasn't a lot of choices. So I called up Lucky. He had an apartment literally right up the street from the Whiskey, the punk rock party pad. And I just called him up and asked if I could do it. And the first thing he said was no. And then I guess they still couldn't find anybody to do it. Not really sure what the genesis was. And I guess he talked to Kim. I guess he ran into Kim and Rodney and vetted me, and then suddenly he called me back because one of the first things he said on our phone call was, no girls putting my record out. And I was like, cool. And I knew
he really said that.
he actually said
specifically
that to me. Yep.
Because you're a girl, he doesn't want you putting
exactly.
your record
like it was
out.
just like the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard of. But you'd have to know Lucky to know that that's kind of the guy that he is. I mean, hopefully he's not that way anymore, but he had quite a high opinion of himself. But I didn't know Keith, but I had been seeing Keith at shows, ever since I left my parents' house, and went into town, ever since I went to any show, because he was always there. So,
Right.
So you had heard the record then when you tried to court them?
Rodney had played a bunch of it. I don't think he played the whole thing, but he had played like a few tracks. He was kind of stuck on a few tracks.
Yeah. What was your impression of it? Because it's such a timeless record.
Oh my God. I was a huge Circle Jerks fan for starts, because I saw Keith in Black Flag, and I just, the Black Flag experience couldn't be beat. But no, I thought the Jerks were great because I loved the way Hudson played guitar. I'd seen him play, and, like any footage you've seen of them, it's like just people flying through the air. I was lucky their set was only like 18 or 20 minutes because they just barely ever got through it. Without it just becoming, just complete and total chaos. So I really wanted to do it. I figured I had no shot. So it was just kind of totally bizarre when it was like I was in the record biz. And so I decided to put it out, and that we made that deal because I had to look at the contract recently, and took me, instead of like 2 years like the Flyboys, it was more like 6 or 7 months to get it out, which was still way too long. But I just had nothing but chaos with the pressing plant. They were terrible people and just kept putting me off. And then I finally got Rainbow to come and pick up all the components. And then I was at Rainbow for 40 years until they closed last fall.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, that one went much better than the Flyboys. That was a whole new, then I was like, I didn't quit my job or anything, but it was like a whole new world. If somebody cared that you put a record out instead of like, so.
Yeah. So a lot of it had to do with like Bomp just didn't care about hardcore music.
No, Greg didn't like it. I played it for him before I put it out because, he was a big mentor to me and a good friend. And I didn't want to, I saved all the good stuff for me. I didn't have any say it, with A&R over at Bomb, but, and it would have been easier for me, obviously, if I just had an overseer role instead of spending my very own money. But he didn't get it. No, he didn't like it. Didn't get it. Thought it was crap. So I was like, all right. So I had his blessing. And I used his employees. Diane Zincabbage that worked at Bomp did my earliest covers up through, probably up through the Long Riders, I guess. And so they were really, really cool about it. They cut me a lot of slack if I had to, go take things to the printers or go pick up this or that thing. They were super cool about it.
How did early distribution work of records in 1980 compared to, what distribution would become?
I can't think there wasn't much going on, but Gem, if you've heard of those guys, JEM, they were like the biggie and they could actually get your stuff coast to coast. And then there was like little tiny local people, like really small. There's a place called City Hall up in San Francisco. And I don't know, they're all long gone. I think Rough Trade was one of the very, very earliest.
So did you just go and approach Gem with like having 2 LPs?
Yeah, well, actually, Bob was a good friend of mine. He was almost a partner in Frontier. I'm glad that all of my friends flaked out because I had 4 or 5 friends. We were all going to do Frontier together. And every last one of them, when push came to shove to put in money, they were like, I don't really want to do it. So, but Bob was a good friend of mine. So that was really good because I always got paid because there was a lot of people that didn't get paid, but I always got paid on time. And distribution was patchy. And I sold directly to stores. I sold to the original Rhino. And, Zed in Long Beach, as far as I could drive my sweet, sweet ride, I would fill it up with records and go drop them off everywhere.
Yeah,
I could use them, but like the Circle Jerks record, believe it or not, was like so on fire. It was like a Bee Gees record or something. And if I had, if I got them from the plant, like they didn't even want to wait like the day that it took UPS. They'd be like, no, I need him Friday night. So I would like go to Long Beach on Friday, if you know what that's like. If that means anything to you, like, okie doke.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully traffic was better in 1980 than in the 90s when I was driving Oxnard to Long Beach. But
oh my God. Yeah. No, it was nothing like now, but yeah, it was not something you wanted to do, especially in a Pinto going like 45, 46 miles an hour.
Yeah, I saw in an interview that you had a Pinto. That's so ill.
Oh, it was so good, man. It was like top.
Was it lime?
It was white and it had lime green or like green. I wouldn't call them racing stripes. They were just like stripes on it. And
as long as there was green in there.
Yeah, it had to have green instead of like, I always wanted one of those flesh colored ones, but yeah, it was sweet as hell.
Lisa, you mentioned seeing Keith with Black Flag. Did you get to see all four singers?
I have seen all four singers. I've seen almost everybody in the world sing with Black Flag, I think.
So maybe you're the first definitive person we can ask. Who was the best?
It had to be Keith. Yeah, hands away. I mean, Henry was super entertaining, and he's a friend of mine, but, not my favorite singer. And, kind of go from there, Des, all those guys were characters, Ron and everybody, but I didn't really have a lot of regard for them as singers. Sorry, people.
How about, so the next record you do is the Adolescents self-titled album that everyone calls the Blue Album. What were your first impressions of that band and how did they end up getting on Frontier?
The Adolescents were superstars of Rodney because Posh Boy Amoeba was on. What record was it, Ben? Was it Beach Boulevard or Rodney on the Rock?
Rodney on the Rock.
Amoeba was like a breakout hit. Like they played it all the time on K-Rock. I can't remember which. I don't think it's on Beach Boulevard. Anyway,
it's on Rodney Volume 1.
Rodney on the Rock, right? So those guys also, like, thank God for Robbie because everybody worked with him once and they hated him. So Frank called me up when I was. I never even asked him like where he got my number or anything, but it doesn't matter. He called me while I was at Bomp and we talked for like a half an hour and they told me what they wanted to do and wanted to make sure I was cool. And so we were like, yeah, let's make a record. And yeah, they were just, they're just regular old nice kids. They were just super easy to work with. And we recorded at this place in beautiful Sun Valley where I'm from. And again, state of the art studio because the music business had completely collapsed in the 70s. So we got this place that was, would have been $2 or $3 or even in those days, couple $1,000s a day lockout. And we got it for $200 or $300 because I just wanted somebody to be there. So we just, because they lived in Orange County, I just found them some flea bag motel that was not very far from the studio. And thank God they didn't burn it down or anything. And they recorded there. They're very well behaved. Went in there, did their part. First day was kind of rocky. The producer, Tom Wilson, who did a lot of records for me, didn't get the music and he was really, really mad. And the next day he came to work and he loved it. Like he was just all about it. Like he's like, I didn't get it. I didn't know what they were doing. And because he worked on Seals and Crofts and like super 70s, like the most, whatever. He's like, he didn't think people should play, like it really wasn't that good, good of music.
Yeah.
Or maybe they weren't in time. And I was like, dude, that's not even the point. Like, does it matter if they're playing in time? And so he got it.
Yeah, that was really common, I think, where a punk band would be in a studio with an engineer who just had no concept of what punk was or what it was about. And like a lot of records got ruined that way, but that record came out great. So it was like serendipitous that this guy who had no background in punk, like something in his brain clicked and he ended up doing a lot of classic punk records.
Yeah,
but that was the first one.
Yeah, everybody. As far as I know, well, he recorded some stuff for Bomp, but it was like Stiv Bader, so it wasn't like hardcore. It was, it was like rock music anyway. But Stiv Bader's band was, again, was like Boston compared to anybody that I brought his way.
Right.
That's so interesting because, Adolescents is one of the most musical punk bands. I mean,
absolutely.
The Black Hole is like a an apex of musical punk songs. Like, so maybe they're the perfect gateway band for him to like
Yeah.
get into it.
And I was there. I don't consider myself a producer, and I never even say anything at all. But I just wanted to be there to make sure, because I don't trust anybody. I just wanted to be sure that they didn't kill each other, break anything, pee on the board or anything. So I would just, park myself there the entire time they're making the record. They are the funniest people, especially together. Like Steve and Frank, hysterical, like just like the Cut Up Kids, because you get so tired. I mean, they would work like more than 12 hours straight. And yep. And that's tough when you're playing that stuff. And then Frank would play a guitar solo and he'd go, leche. And I'd be like, milk? And he'd go, yeah, oh, that solo is terrible. Erase it immediately. So they just had their own words and their own language and everything. And
was it Frank doing the solos, or was it both Rick and Frank trading off?
It was Rick and Frank, but I would say Frank did a little touching up of Rick's stuff, because Rick has a very limited ability to focus. So after he had played a solo a few times, but it's not Frank instead of Rick. It's kind of a blend. But you can tell. I mean, you can tell on All by Myself. You could tell Rick's style. I mean, it was like super easy for Frank to fill in, be a fill in. It'd be like a stand-in actor or something.
And it's Rick writing most of the material, or who's actually writing the songs?
He wrote a lot of it. Casey and Rick wrote some stuff. A lot of it was really, really early on, before Tony was even in the band. But I would say, Rick has a credit on most things. Tony has a lot of credits because he wrote the lyrics, but it's kind of spread around, really. But the ones that are the super legendary ones on the record, like Kids of the Black Hole, are Rick.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit about the LP cover? Do you know?
Sure.
Do you know what went into that? Because it's so iconic.
Well, those were the days when UPCs were new, and then the generic stuff, when you'd go to the store and a pack of cigarettes would say like cigarettes were on it, and it didn't, you didn't have to buy anything from Philip Morris, it just said cigarettes. So we were all just delighted with that. So Tony I kind of ran with it. Tony wanted it to be generic like that. It was before Flipper, right? Was it the same time? I can't recall. Anyway, so I gave it to Diane's and Cabbage, and I was like, they really want it to look like, like a generic record, like, like something if you walked into Ralph's and it looks like album. So after that, she just came up with that and presented it, and I showed it to them, and they were like, oh my God. And the second thing they wanted was that thing where it hurt your eyes, the blue and the red together. So the two requirements they had were those colors, hurting your eyes, and the generic thing. And we're like, knocked it out of the park.
That's awesome.
By the time we did the back cover, like they already, I wouldn't say they got along that well, all five of them. There was camps of some people that got along and some that didn't. But they would not pose together on the back cover. Like that was Glennie Friedman's job, and they would not even stand together. So that's why there's portraits. So there you go. Secret.
It's funny that you mentioned the hurting your eyes thing, because I wrote that book about cold chilling, and the cold chilling colors are those exact same colors as the Adolescents album, and for that exact same reason. So that it would hurt your eyes.
Yeah. No, it's a great thing. And most people avoid it for that very reason. And we were like, the only thing that could have made it more hurt your eyes is if I could have afforded somebody to silk screen all of them, but that would have been ridiculous. I mean, I never would have gotten them in stores if we were silk screening, where you got the real true day glow. But that's the best we could do, but it was cool.
What was so Adolescents are from Fullerton, which is North Orange County.
Yes.
How was that scene different than the South Bay, where Circle Jerks were from, or Huntington, where some of TSOL was from, and that whole scene? Like, could you differentiate those areas?
I wouldn't say musically I necessarily could differentiate it. Like the South Bay bands were harsher or more violent, because you had the whole Pedro Minutemen thing, so it kind of ran the gamut. But I would say the Orange County, like the true Orange County HB ones, were the guys that were really the toughest people. Like Fullerton's, I don't know if it's a nicer suburb, but it's more, I don't know. It's just kind of different than Huntington Beach, where the kids are a little richer and like way more messed up on a kids of the black hole level, where they're, a lot more drugs but anyway, the kids so misbehaved. I went to Cuckoo's Nest a lot to see bands, and they were very poorly behaved compared to like the old people, when I would go to the mask and stuff, and people weren't really hurting each other or making a target out of someone. There's no circle pit. So it was just a completely different thing.
Right.
But I'll say the clubs in the South Bay were scarier for whatever reason. There was just, I don't know, they were just really crappy. Maybe it'd be a restaurant. There was like dancing waters and all kinds of stuff. And, really crappy and run down. But no, you get there, there'd be like zero security. Like maybe they hired a door guy to take tickets or something. And a lot of fighting and trouble and M80s and bad things.
Huh.
Right.
Did Tony do all his vocal tracks twice on the LP?
Yes. And you want to hear something interesting? I'm going to give you guys a worldwide scoop.
Please.
I always remembered that we recorded, not on every song, but a lot of songs, we recorded 2 sets of vocals, because Tony took his lyrics and he had maybe half the song was cussing. And Rick and Frank Steve and Frank just got super bummed about that, because they really thought it was going to be like some super duper #1 record. So Tony recorded 2 sets of vocals, and there's the occasional cuss word in mine, but not really, nothing really bad. So I went back to my engineer and I had him, play the 2-inch tapes, and there is some of those vocals, and you're going to hear some of those new versions of Forward Too Long.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we had to remix it, obviously, but he's really good. So he made it, it doesn't sound exactly like the Blue Album, but it doesn't sound like, some creepy, MTV record. It sounds super cool, but it doesn't sound exactly like we mixed it in those days. So sometimes my brain works better than other times.
Is that the reason what is the reason that No Friends is missing from the lyric sheet?
You know what? I never even knew why he just wouldn't. Tony just said no, and that was it. At that point in time, Tony was such a fucking jerk. Like, he was just awful. Like, he was just like the most, it was almost like he was a cartoon character of obstinance. And I don't know what the reason, I still don't know why, if he just hated him. But if you're singing and it's on the record, I don't know. Just what, nope, not giving you the lyrics. Like, okay.
So, right. I thought it had to do with what the lyrics were, which I still can't really, I can only make out some of it.
I know.
But it might be
the
like,
other thing. It's like really, really hard to understand. Maybe he didn't want to take the time to figure out what he said. I don't know. It was really fun.
Earlier,
first. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, earlier you mentioned Robbie Fields, who had the record label Posh Boy, who put out a lot of bands that ended up on Frontier, put out stuff either on comps on Posh Boy, or TSOL put out a whole record. And I was just wondering, like, what's the connection with Posh Boy? What?
It was only, honestly, I probably wouldn't exist at all if Robbie didn't irritate the shit out of the bands, because they would have kept working with them. And I would have wound up with something. I mean, I would have, God knows I love Red Cross, but they recorded for Posh Boy. But anyway, they worked with him once, and he did fancy himself a record producer, and they hated him. Like, Tony, if you just say the word Robbie, like, he'll just go insane. Because he would just make him sing the same thing over and over and over again, like he was Phil Spector. And Tony's not that guy. Tony is not that guy. Like, you get 1-2 takes out of him, and you got to move on. Or at least then, I don't know. He's like now, but you move on.
It seems like you can't physically sing. If you're screaming, you can't physically sing the same thing 100 times in a row. And
the first or second one's going to be the best anyway. It's just going to be the best, probably. It's not, there's no need for Stanley Kubrick stuff here. So,
right.
What were your first impressions of TSOL?
TSOL, I loved TSOL, and I'm still super bitter that I never put out the black and white cover one because I think that EP is phenomenal. But they hated him too, so that's how I went up them. But I saw TSOL a few times at the Cuckoo's Nest. They were really rough, and then mostly Jack was notorious, like he was his own underground superstar because he was fighting all the time. He hung around or was in Vicious Circle. I'm not sure if he was a formal Vicious Circle, but just would get, I mean, he's a huge guy, huge, scary, muscly dude, and would just get in crazy fights. But also you'd see him and he was wearing like the craziest outfits. He wasn't afraid to wear, he didn't feel like he had to wear like punk rock clothes. And the very first time I saw them, they played in the Valley. No, not the first time I saw them. The time when I met them was at Devonshire Downs in the Valley at Northridge College. And that was the famous one where he was wearing like the white face paint and like some lady's giant ass dress. And there was all these gang troubles then as detailed in that, I can't remember the name of it, that book about La Mirada punks. All these people hated Jack. So basically the entire audience, beat Jack up and then he'd get back on stage and get pulled in the crowd and get hit somewhere. It was like the craziest shit. And I was totally in. I was like 100% like, let's do it.
Wow.
Did they approach you then, or did you approach them?
You know what? I could say I remember, but I really don't. I'm gonna say I believe Frank told me that I had to keep an eye on TSOL because they were so awesome because he had seen him a whole bunch.
So when you said you didn't know if Jack was in Vicious Circle,
yeah,
he was in a band called Vicious Circle, but Vicious Circle was also the name of the gang.
There was the gang, and I think it morphed into a band at some point.
Okay.
But he would do hilarious stuff. One time when I got to the Cuckoo's Nest, he had started a rumor that he died, and everybody was all crying and stuff. And then he like jumps out of somebody's car, and he's like, "I'm not dead, assholes, idiot." So he was the life of the party. And then when we made the record, he had some terrible stories about crime that they'd done. No, not murder or anything, but just, breaking and entering and stuff. I mean, those guys are like the real thing. And as you know, except for Jack, all three of them did time. And I think Todd, I don't know if Todd ever got out. He did I don't know, whatever Todd did. I don't think he ever got out of prison. I think he died in prison.
I think Todd got out because I regret missing the show, but they did a reunion in 1999 at Bergamot Station with like the Go-Go's and
I did see that show. I was there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, was
the
Todd
last F
playing
word
drums?
show ever.
Oh.
I want to say he was, but then by the time I saw TSOL, it was like he was like right after he died, like 2000 maybe.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not certain. But those guys were all.
That's good. He got out. Anyway, it was something to do with burglary or drugs or drug burglary. I don't know, but it was bad. Like it was really bad. I didn't know people that did things that bad. Like, I knew people that got DUIs or something, but not like people that like really did time. That was crazy.
Right. What kind of deals did these bands have with Frontier? Like you had them sign contracts?
I did have them sign contracts. I only did one-offs just because I was like one person in a house. At that point I had, didn't live with my parents, but it didn't seem right. It didn't seem seemly to sign somebody for a long term. And it was easy too. If you just do like, 50-50 after expenses, one record, it didn't become something. Because that was the other thing Robbie did was try to sign you for 7 years and stuff. And they're like, oh, hell no.
Right.
But because contracts very important. Even if you're one person and you're not really that serious about being in the music business, they have saved my ass. I just use Greg Shaw's, but saved my ass a million times.
Yeah, I noticed that you didn't do follow-up albums with a lot of these bands.
No, once they got big, they were all like, we're big now and we don't even know your name and we're not going to put you on the list. And then they wind up on like Faulty. You know where everybody went after me. And their second record's really not that good in general. Really.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would have done it, mind you. I would have done another one, but everybody would be after they got to a certain level and they drew really well at all the clubs. So somebody come along and sweet talk them, and then they'd make a crummy record. And I was like, oh, well, there's plenty of fish in the sea.
Right.
Let's talk about you branch out a little bit. Did you have anything else on TSOL, Ben? Sorry.
Oh no, that's all I have. I love that album, by the way. The Dance with Me.
It's good. I like that record a lot myself, but I really love the EP. Like if those two records were merged, that would be like the perfect record.
Right.
Well, I'll just chime in and say I like the next one as well. So, but whatever. Lisa, how do you branch out and try to do a band like Christian Death? How does that come about?
Well, it wasn't that big of a departure, but again, that was my A&R guy. Frank told me that, Rick was playing with them. Of course, it didn't occur to Rick to tell me that he was playing in another band, but Frank had seen them around, and he had seen those weird shows that they did called art shows where they would, just take over a storefront and just do artsy noises and stuff, because it kind of wasn't really what my record sounded like. And then I heard the track on Hell Comes to Your House, which is a pretty big comp. I didn't like half of the stuff, but there was some really good tracks on it. But the really standout one was Christian Death. And, so I was down and dirty enough where you could just make a decision, and it didn't cost that much to go in the studio. I mean, maybe instead of 3 days, it was 5 days. And I tried to find the studio where we did it. It was really weird. It was somewhere on Gower and Sunset in the Paramount lot. And again, we got this crazy deal because of Tom Wilson knew someone. But now they've reconfigured Paramount so much that I don't know if the studio even exists. It just looks like a fortress. So anyway, but we did that there. Right. And that was a crazy experience making that record. I never had more like hangers on. Just like people, just sitting around and served no purpose. It drove me crazy. And Rick was really out of it. He was super, just wouldn't show up. If it was an all-day session or an all-night session or whatever, he'd show up hours late. We didn't know if he was going to come. So it's definitely very dramatic.
What was that whole death rock thing, like a totally separate scene from punk or hardcore at that time in Southern California?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Christian Death were kind of its own deal altogether, but yes, they were not really, there's a 45 grade. There was that whole goth thing, but the other bands were kind of more punk-like, I would say, where Christian Death were just doing their totally whole Roz thing, and people didn't know if he was a boy or a girl, and it was very kind of mysterious and intriguing. But and then there was kind of that sound was sort of developing, so all those kind of Hell Comes to Your House bands could kind of play together.
How did you feel about the LP once it was done? Because it is really a game changer.
I really liked it, and I'm still super proud of it. Like that one definitely was a cut above the punk ones, I would say, in terms of music. Because once Rick rallied and we got in a big enough fight, and I got him to do his thing, the Tubular Bells and the whole thing. Like Rick, I rented them, and Rick had never touched a tubular bell, and he figured out how to play them. I don't know if you ever seen Tubular Bells, but you just look at it and you're like, I don't know what to do with that. And he figured out tone wise how to play them and put them in the right places. And so yeah, I'm really proud of that record. I think it's good. A lot of people hate Roz's voice, but there you go. He's the guy. That's his band. That's his baby. If you don't like people have asked me for a copy of the record without his voice on it. I'm like, come on.
Wow. Can you describe a little bit about like what it was like seeing Christian Death like right after that LP came out?
They were, they weren't like the greatest live band in the world. They did not play live a whole lot, but it was very musical, but they personally weren't like running around or doing anything like that. They were kind of, intent on playing the music the way it sounded, but their fans are pretty crazy. Before they played, they would go to like somewhere like Hollywood Forever, or maybe a smaller cemetery, and just steal like carloads full of flowers and then put them all over the stage. And so they did those crazy kids, they did some crazy stunts.
I thought you were going to say they stole body parts. I really thought you were going to say that.
They probably, can you imagine how mad? But yeah, Mario's a pretty good friend of mine. I've been going to whiskey since a 72 or 73. You'd be like, what is this garbage? This is terrible. And there was one time where they, and he was super Catholic Italian guy. And they pretended to crucify Roz at one of their shows. And he was like, I don't want to see those guys ever here. I don't know if he really banned them or he just said he was, but he was not happy with Christian death.
Again, you mentioned your parents. Your parents were kind of upset that you put out that record because they were kind of religious.
No, they're not religious at all, but they were just like,
religious.
Yeah, they weren't religious, but they were like that. They just saw the cover and the whole thing. And they were just like, because I'd always been blowing their minds with stuff that blew their minds, whether it was Bowie or whatever. And they're like, what is this crap? But I would get mail. That was like 82, that record came out. And I would get mail at the P.O. box and I'd show her how some mom, mailed the record back to me and she had like broken it in a million pieces or things like that. So it was pretty funny. To be like, see, I told you.
Let's talk about coming across suicidal tendencies. How do they come across? Like,
where do they fit in? So I knew Mr. Glennie Friedman for a very long time, and he, quote unquote, managed them. He can't really manage suicidal tendencies, but he managed them. And he would bring me demos, and I'd be like, that dude can't sing. Like, they're just not good. And he'd tell me, he had described very colorfully what their crowd was like, and they were, gang members, and they were all, the Mexicans and blacks and white people all together. They loved them. And I'd be like, I just don't hear any tunes. And I had several demos. Anyway, finally brought me the one that institutionalized on it. And then I got it. Like I had not seen them play or anything, but then when he played me demos that he made and had institutionalized, it was like, okay, I give up. But people hated them, and the reaction to me doing it was not good because they just had the worst reputation in the world, and people are just like bummed.
That's so early. Like, what was the reputation of that time?
The band members themselves were violent. They were gang members, but they did a lot of fighting. They're young men. They did plenty of like pretty chronic fighting. And their fans were terrible. And whatever club they would play, they would just, ruin everything and make sure that Suicidal could never come back. And then I was working at the time with the band called the 3 o'clock, the poppy 3 o'clock. I don't know if it's true. Don't know. Have no idea. Don't have any evidence. But when they played the Music Machine, somebody stole all their gear out of the dressing room. And everybody said it was Suicidal, and they do that stuff all the time. So I didn't have a good opinion of them. But again, I have no proof. Could have been anybody. Could have been an inside job. But apparently they were known to boost other people's gear.
Wow.
And so anyway, I didn't have a good opinion of them. The city didn't, whatever. But I was like, I'm going to make this record. And, Glenn was my pal, and I knew he would get good performances out of him. Like he did produce the record and tell Mike to stop and, sing it better. That wasn't good because, you just don't say stuff like that to Mike Muir. And it was a pretty painless 3 or 4 or 5 days. I can't remember. It was nothing memorable about the session itself. Everybody got along and played their parts. And you know what? That record was a total stiff. That was the worst stiff I ever put out for like 2 years. And then Glenn kept bugging me. We got to, MTV, and we got to make a video. And, I had done a 3 o'clock one that was kind of popular. And I was like, dude, this record is dead in the water. I am not making a video. So he's like, I'll make a video. Okay, I'll do it. So Glenn actually pulled all the budget and everything together from the band. And they were the ones that paid for the video.
Yeah, that's crazy because I've talked to other people and said, hey, that record didn't sell well when it first came out, and it blows their mind. Like, how could that be? Like people who were,
it sold worse than the China White record. Like it was dead. And I was like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have put this stupid thing out. Because I was on kind of a roll. Nothing was like a million seller, but I was on kind of a roll where every record would make their money back, if not do pretty well. And it sat there
for 2 years.
Like 2 whole years. And then once MTV played it a few times, it started out slow, like at night, or I don't know if 120 minutes it started. Anyway, got a few plays on MTV, then K-Rock picked it up, and then it was ridiculous. Then it was just like insane.
The original version of Institutionalized that you heard on that demo, were the lyrics different?
I still have the cassette hanging up in my room, but I don't have a cassette player anymore. But I would say probably it was a work in progress because he would sing it kind of different every time.
Right. I heard that
a little bit different.
I heard that the lyric was changed from maybe Coke or another kind of soda to Pepsi for a specific reason, but I don't know if that's like complete nonsense.
I would
that's
say
not true at all.
If that is true at all, I don't know that to be true. Doesn't mean it isn't.
Okay.
It's because Glenn's a pain in the ass and probably hates Coke or something. And Glenn just said, no, pick, because when Glenn bugs you, you're just like, all right, fine, whatever you say. Because he's very persuasive, but I don't know if they had another product.
I can't imagine that line.
Thank goodness. I know. Thank goodness they picked Pepsi. Maybe it just had to be a 2-word.
Well, yeah, I was thinking like it has to be 2 syllables, right? Because Coke
Mountain Dew's way too many syllables. Has to be 2 syllables.
Yeah, it has to be.
I was wondering about Glennie Friedman. Like, he's a famous photographer, so it's weird that he also produced and managed Suicidal Tendencies. Like, how did that even come to be?
He was just so about them for whatever reason. He was just so into them. Maybe for him, he just wanted to try something new too, or because he was their fan. Okay, Mike Muir's brother's a very famous skater, Jim Muir. So I think Glenn, had some inkling that this is going to be this marriage between the two cultures, and he liked them and all that kind of stuff. Because he, as you know from his photo books, he was there way before there was hardcore taking photos of skaters.
Right.
Was Venice its own scene, or
there was a scene. I wasn't probing it that much. Like, I didn't really know. I knew that they had their whole thing going on, but I wasn't super familiar with the bands. It wasn't my area. I went to the same stuff, the same whatever, Vex and Whiskey and whatever was open, but I don't really know what happened in Playa and Venice and all that.
Was the gang thing that was associated with them, was that heavier than the gangs that were associated with other bands?
It was kind of their gang kind of was suicidal more than a Crips and Bloods or M13 or something. It was like that was their thing, and they did wear those shirts. They had the white dress shirts thing, and super distinctive, and whatever. If they like the Misfits, then they would have the Misfits hairdo along with the white shirt. It was all very confusing.
Right.
But when they played, I saw them play a couple of times, and their audience went completely super scary looking anyway. You just kind of stay away from them. But they played Perkins Palace, which is a very stately kind of venue, kind of like the El Rey doesn't have seats anymore. But if the Fonda had velvet chairs in it, anyway, they just kicked the shit out of that place. They just broke everything they could break. And I'd be like, oh, that's why nobody will book any shows with these guys. So they couldn't even play in Los Angeles. They couldn't even play in the city limits. Nobody would book them.
Right. It's just, so that wasn't you hear the gangs are associated with other bands the Family with Circle One, or you hear Bad Religion a little bit with the Lads and so forth. But with the Suicidal thing, it seems like it's on another level.
It was on their own posse, and there are people had been in and out of jail and juvie and stuff like that. Yeah, the Circle One thing, that's a whole nother story. Yeah, that Lotta Murata book was pretty educational.
Did you think that book was accurate or no?
I don't know how accurate. I didn't know much about it. I just saw the graffiti and everything, but I mean, geez, I didn't know people were killing each other and stuff. People, they took drugs and things, but I didn't know any of that stuff was happening until after the fact. It was pretty surprising.
There's a record. There's a song on that first Suicidal album called "I Shot the Devil," but he's singing "I Shot Reagan,"
right?
And I'm just wondering, there's a story. There's a story there. I know there is.
There is a story which is nobody is allowed to make any threats against the president whatsoever. They take that stuff very serious. So I don't think I suggested it, It was probably Glenn, since Mike would actually listen to Glenn. So that was specifically so he didn't get in trouble. But ironically, I did get a visit from the FBI. And I wouldn't let
Tell
him
us
come
about
over
that.
to my 1-bedroom apartment. So I met at my parents' house, which is probably not the greatest idea. So I'm almost terrified. It's like, you're going to go to prison. And anyway, they questioned me. They're very polite and they questioned me about it. And I was like, he has no intention of killing the president. It's just a song. And they were like, oh, we have to follow all this stuff up. So we just wanted to ask you, like, what's up? And I was like, yeah, you don't have to worry about it. And they're like, cool. All right. So
How did they know? How did the FBI find out about the
I
song?
don't know. I don't know. Somebody, some mother was mad and called the FBI because parents are pretty upset sometimes when some of these records came home with their kids. But I don't know how the FBI, I don't think I wouldn't put it in an ad or anything. So I really genuinely don't know. But
Right.
good work, FBI.
Did you ever speak with the band about that and ask them if they got questioned as well?
I know I was the only one. I don't think you could even find any of them if they were trying to. But I'm sure I was the only one that got a visit. In fact, I called Glenn and told him, and we had a good laugh about how weird it was.
Wow.
You'd think that they would interview Mike, right? Like, are you going to kill the president?
Right. He's the guy who said he'd do it.
Because I certainly can't represent that I know anything that Mike would ever do, ever.
And this is 2 years after Reagan was actually shot. I mean,
yeah, I don't know what year it was, but it was like, yeah, you don't want to take that stuff seriously because you never know. Telling their little fans that break all the chairs to go shoot Reagan.
Yeah. Were you surprised about what Suicidal merged into and how huge they got?
Extremely. Yeah, it was weird. They just tapped into something where people just, it was the right song, and I guess it was the right song in the right time, and it kind of had that metal tinge to it.
Right, but how about the rest of their career? Were you surprised when they went?
Oh, that.
Huge they were able
you
to
know
go?
what?
They made that successful transition.
I hate to be cruel, but I didn't really. They wrote a few good songs after that, but they never wrote anything as good as Institutionalized. They had a few tunes that weren't too bad, maybe the next record or the record after that. And then, man, I heard some of them, they were just terrible.
Yeah.
But people liked them and they still do, and they still draw good crowds, but it's not, good for them. They can play with sort of rap crossover bands or heavy metal, rap, rock and roll, punk rock thing. They can kind of maneuver around.
Right. So what are the 3 best selling records on Frontier?
Definitely Suicidal. Neck and Neck would be Adolescents and Circle Jerks. And then TSOL, TSOL didn't sell that well. It was people really liked it, but it wasn't, I don't know what happened, but they were not part of the bigger early records kind of thing. And after that, everything kind of didn't really particularly sell that well. But I would say ST, Circle Jerks, and then Ads.
Maybe it was something about I've heard Jack talk about how TSOL didn't go over well in the rest of the country. The East Coast didn't get TSOL.
That doesn't surprise.
Yeah, but it trips me out because it's so good. What?
I know.
Why would you not like this just because you're from New Jersey instead of LA? Who cares? It sounds good to me. I don't know.
You know what? It's that whole thing that I don't understand. That whole Steve Blush, the East Coast is good and the West Coast is bad, when clearly we are so far superior to the East Coast scene. But anyway, Discord aside, I'm talking Discord aside, but there's some good bands or whatever. But I mean, Agnostic Front versus any frontline LA band or OC band, no. Sorry.
Yeah.
People.
Don't make me chime in on that one.
Yeah. Zach is a huge AF fan.
But anyway, there was that whole, that's why you can't trust history books, because they just totally give LA the short shrift, and they're like, oh, Boston, whatever it is, whatever.
Yeah, one of my biggest punk hardcore regrets is not chucking that guy into a trash can.
Really?
Well, yeah, because one of my bands played a show up in Seattle, and he did the slideshow, and I was just thinking like, this guy's like going on and on telling us like hardcore died in '86, but yet he's like piggybacking on the back of our show to do a slideshow and sell a book.
Slideshow of what?
When he put out his book, he did like.
Are you talking about Steve Blush?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Don't even get me started on that shit.
I want to get you started because I'm starting.
First of all, Seconds was that magazine. They were that magazine where if you ran an ad, you could be on the cover of a feature. And I'd be like, this is just, Jack Rabbit would never do that, but you completely bought and sold for. But my personal bitterness is the hardcore movie. I took that guy down to the mask. He had the run of the mask to photograph it, all the graffiti and everything. There isn't one frame of that. He didn't use any of it at all. I was like, what a total dick. And also I'm bitter because I'm not even in it. I'm not even in the extras. Like, I would play the girl card. Just had the same people. It was like everyone from the East Coast, and they kind of blazed through Los Angeles. So I saw the premiere of that at the Vista, and me and Ed Culver was just like kicking stuff. We're like, this movie sucks.
So why do you think that the LA gets glazed over?
I don't know. It's just so stupid. I don't know. It's just always been like that. Like, it's not, LA's not real because there's sunshine and we have to trudge around in snow. So you guys suck. And it's like all those bands sound like some version of the, an LA band. They're all like the lousy version of whoever the LA prototype is.
I have this theory that the reason that LA and OC aren't talked about in those circles as being like the godfathers is because you have that, because LA is where it transitions from punk to hardcore. And like, so then if you come into it from a hardcore perspective, you look at all that stuff, you look at, Adolescents and TSOL as punk. And if you came into it from punk, you look at those bands as hardcore. In other words, it's like they kind of fall through the middle.
Right.
But who knows?
But I mean, they were definitely post like the, for lack of a better term, just the LA thing was screamers, weirdos, but even the Cramps and whatever that was punk just because it was like those people were never going to get record deals kind of thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, I was going to ask about how you pivoted kind of away from hardcore right around the time that Suicidal album came out, and you were putting out like Paisley Underground stuff and other types of music. And I'm just wondering, like, what actually
it was pre-Suicidal. I would say I started working with the Salvation Army, who again were on New Alliance, and they were from San Pedro, and they were pretty punky just because they didn't play that well. And but I always liked the pop punk thing. That was my deal. And so I don't know. I didn't see good stuff coming out of the hardcore scene. It was super repetitive after I don't know, like maybe 83. It was just like kind of the same old stuff. So I just lost interest in it, to tell you the truth. Like when Christian Death came around, and I put out, the Flyboys had morphed into hilarious, sort of a new romantic band called Choir Invisible. I put that out. That's the worst selling Frontier record. And so yeah, I was just kind of moving around, and then I got into the the 3 o'clock kind of corralled this whole thing called the Paisley Underground that was sort of a retro sound but good. So I didn't see any punk that I wanted to work with for quite a while. I mean, I would have signed Jawbreaker in a heartbeat. I never had a shot, but they were like my favorite band. I would have signed them in a second.
In the late 80s,
not in the cards.
Yeah, in the late 80s and up to 90, you license and reissue like a bunch of classic stuff. Like you do the second Circle Jerks record. You get the Damned, a couple records, I believe.
Yeah, I traded those. There was a label called it was originally Stiff, and then it became Demon. So they loved this band I had called Thin White Rope. So I just traded them. Like I'd be like, no advance, just let me put out the first Damned and Music for Pleasure. And then there was a horrible EP called Not the Captain's Birthday Party, which is a massive Stiff. But anyway, so that was great to have the Damned, because I won't call them my friends, but I was friendly with them like when they came to the States, and we drove them all over the place. So it was just like a cool thing to do the Damned.
And then also like the Danger House reissues.
Yes, and that took a long those and the Weirdos took forever because all the people hated each other. Like by the time it was the late 80s, early 90s, like they all just completely weren't talking and refused to negotiate or hear anything about it. So those took a long time. David Brown and the owner of Danger House, Pat Garrett, just weren't on speaking terms. So I wasn't going to just like, oh, well, I'll talk to one. I'll just go put it out and let the other one sue me. So I didn't want to do that. Anyway, those fell together, and I'm really proud of those. Those are super good and important records.
Did you own the Danger House catalog, or
no? I just rep it for David. David and Pat still own it, but I put the stuff out and then I license it. It gets used actually a pretty fair amount. Where there's going to be a Bags track in the next Wes Anderson movie, so they're pretty excited about that. I know, because I'm a big fan, so I was so excited.
Lisa, whose idea was it to like break all that stuff up, like on the Danger House volumes? To not put the record.
There was no thought process at all because David was extremely not helpful. So I would be like, what do you think of this? What should we do? Should we just put A and B and then what? And then he'd be like, I don't care. So it was just sort of haphazard. And I have enough stuff to do a pretty mediocre third volume. So that's never really been a priority, but we should probably just put out everything at this point.
I thought you did. You put out that box set. Oh, the box set only had the.
Those were just the A's and B's of the singles. There was no alternate mixes or anything. So we have some stuff slightly different, not crazily different mixes, and maybe a couple of unreleased tracks. But and I put out the Danger House, the Yes LA EP. So most of it's out. Most of it's in print.
Do you have any theories on why the Neutron Bomb 7-inch came out so good?
Just because the Weirdos were, just because they're just awesome. The Weirdos were just so unbelievably good from the second they formed. They were just incredible. Like you can't even picture them if they didn't have John Denny. You just can't even picture what it would be like if they just had some singer that stood there. But the Weirdos just had it all. They just had, they had the image and the songs and the singer.
Right. That's like the greatest crime is that when they recorded that Neutron Bomb 7-inch, that they didn't just do an entire, like record every song they knew in that same session just because it sounded so perfect.
Because they had, that stuff was like somebody's house. It was like a guy that knew the Screamers, like a bedroom or something. It wasn't even like a real proper studio. But yeah, that would have been the greatest record ever made.
Yeah, I mean, close to it, or if not, it might have been.
And I'm sure you guys have seen the announcement of the Screamers record. That was like actually getting stabbed in the heart and dismembered at the same time when Penelope's husband gets to put it out. And the first thing I did when I saw the announcement, I texted KK and I was like, dude, I've talked to you about doing that record for 40 years. And he was like, oh, yeah. Oh, man, you were there at the beginning. And I was like, because we couldn't even find Tommy, who was the guy that wasn't Tomato, the other guy. We couldn't even find him. He was in LA and he was just like MIA. So he comes forward and now there's going to be an official Screamers release. So try not to be too bitter about it, but I'm so freaking mad about that. But
yeah, what's the label that's doing it?
Superior Viaduct. And he does reissues too. But anyway, it's Penelope's husband, so I guess that gets you a lot of credence in the world.
Speaking of reissues,
yes.
Group Sex just got reissued on a brand new label called Trust Records. I'm just wondering how did that deal come about? Because you own Group Sex, right?
Sex, and those guys wanted to have all their records in one place, and I was like, okay, but I don't think you have the money to buy me out. Basically, those guys had the money to give me some money. But, and I could have just said, fuck you. But, it was for Keith, basically, long story short, so Keith should have things and he should have, a solid, he's lived in the same place forever, but, he deserves to have cash flow and not have to worry about money all the time. So they have their own little empire, and Trust is going to put out, Wild in the Streets and whatever other records. I don't think they're going to put out the really stinky ones, but, probably like the first 5, I guess.
That was
like
and honestly, I wouldn't have had the money to do all that stuff that they did with all the booklet and the this and that. The co-owner of Trust has fancy money.
Yeah, he's the bass player of Judge.
But he has a massive publishing company called Songs, and he's incredibly crazy wealthy.
Lisa, Group Sex was off of digital for a long time. Do you have an opinion on the current state of digital music and how the Spotify's and the Apple Musics are dominating the way that people listen to music now?
It's hard to put it succinctly. I'm very bitter about shop. I almost call it Shopify. Everybody to my face, I don't buy records anymore. I just, Spotify is so convenient. You can listen to it. And it's what kind of a soulless zombie? You're going to get rid of all of your records to listen to something on a, a tablet or your watch or some shit. But apparently that's what the kids like, and even the old people like. So, yeah. So I guess it sounds okay. I don't have, super high tech stuff. I don't want to hear things that's, sound like a YouTube record. So,
right.
I mean, I have an iPod and I put my own, I put my own collection on there, but I don't subscribe to Shopify. I guess it's convenient.
So,
but they pay shit. I don't know why the majors, when they could have gotten some real money from, why they let them get away with paying absolutely nothing for everything. So that was a really bad business plan.
Right. Yeah, they kind of bent over backwards for the streaming services.
Just got absolutely nothing for everybody. I guess it's an equality thing, but you don't get a whole bunch more money because you're Lady Gaga. It's crappy for everybody. Whether no matter how famous you are, the money is shit. Except that they get 1 billion more plays, but nobody's going to get rich off of any of those streaming services.
Well, the streaming services will get rich off of the streaming services.
What'd you say?
I said the streaming services will get rich off the streaming.
They get rich, but no musician. Nope, not gonna happen.
So the Trust Records thing, it's like a limit. It's like there's a term, and then it reverts back to Frontier, or is it just Trust have that forever?
It's forever. But it feels kind of good because it's got my logo on it, and they didn't change the artwork. I'm absurdly stubborn about anything like that. So, and they were accommodating. It wasn't like any hostile takeover whatsoever. But I'm I need this, and this, and they're cool. It wasn't like they were trying to change the cover. But speaking of changing the covers, did you guys ever see? Okay, I sold Dance With Me to Epitaph when I got super broke. Long story. And then they sold it to Dexter, which they weren't allowed to do. They weren't allowed to resell it without offering it back to me. So he changes the cover and the font and everything. I never knew what was up with that. Took my logo off. Just made it look like shit. Did you ever see one of those copies there, Ben?
Not that I can recall. He changed the font of the band name?
Yeah, he changed Dance With Me and he changed TS. I don't know why, because I gave Brett the original artwork and the original tapes and everything. I'd be why would you change the cover at this late date? Because it was 96 or something like that. I was why would you make it worse? But I was oh, it's Dexter Holland, the guy with the worst band ever in the history of the world. That's why it sucks now.
Lisa, you can say bad things about Dexter, but don't talk shit on Noodles.
Yeah, you can't touch Noodles.
What about Dexter's jet? Could I talk shit about his jet? I think he had a bunch of jets.
That's so weird.
Yep. So punk, and now he has a hot sauce empire.
And if you think about it, like Offspring basically sounds like dudes who were like, let's do a band that sounds like TSOL mixed with Agent Orange, but like way mellower.
Yeah.
And like that's what, and then they sold 11 million records. Like,
I know.
that's crazy.
But that's the story of like Smashing Pumpkins. Like your 1/1,000,000th is good as the Pixies mixed with whatever all the other bands that are mixed in there. And then they're the guys that have like all the platinum records and stuff. I mean, yes, the Pixies, everybody reveres them more, but it's like they just fully stole from all the bands that were around at that time, and Green Day, let's talk about Green Day. Like not good at all, except for stealing songs and, enough where they didn't get sued for it.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of the Pixies, and you mentioned Jawbreaker earlier.
Uh-huh.
What bands did you want to sign, like all throughout your entire 41 years, like, but you weren't able to get?
Oh God, let me think about this. The heartbreaker, the real true heartbreaker was the Pixies. I was the first person that ever talked to the Pixies. I saw them. I was in Boston and I saw them at a band called TT the Bears, because the same person, Fast Freddy, that I was talking about earlier, he was tour managing a band and the Pixies were playing with them. And I absolutely worshiped them. I thought that was like the demo tape I got was incredible. I mean, it was the most homemade rustic thing you ever heard. And I saw them at TT the Bears, talked to the band, talked to the manager, and I really, 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 this was 87, really wanted to put the record out. And I was very close, except they wanted to put a record out. Like they were just adamant that it had to come out in September. And I had a bunch of things planned. Like for once I had marketing in place and I just basically had no more money or line of credit. So they put out the first EP on Rough Trade and it just exploded. It was just like, I had no hope after that. It was just a one-off on Rough Trade. And then, their career just went bananas. So, oh well, but maybe nobody would have ever heard of them if they were on Frontier.
What about in the hardcore era? Were there hardcore punk bands that you tried to get, but you couldn't get?
I'm trying to think if there was. If there was, I don't recall. Throw some names out there. I can't think of anybody.
I don't know.
I mean, I would have signed Red Cross, but they always, they were always one step ahead, and they kind of worked with Gas a Tank or whatever. But I was always a super big fan. So I did put out Born Innocent, but it was only because Felix closed the label, and so I just bought it, lock, stock, and barrel. But I'm trying to think if there's anybody that I just super duper duper loved, but I don't know. Oh, anyway,
okay.
You remember that band called Morphine? I was going to sign Morphine.
Yeah,
and it wasn't really a Frontier band that much, but I just liked them a whole lot. Do you remember that? They get used every time I watch a TV show or a commercial. They license a Morphine song, and I'm like, damn you.
Yeah, they ended up on. Didn't they end up on?
They were on Ryko. When I was talking to them, we were pretty close to coming to an agreement, and then Ryko, I don't know, called them, I don't know, whatever, and I was like, it would be so much better for you to be on Ryko than Frontier because nobody will probably ever know you exist. So, and they got pretty, I guess, pretty big in that world, the college radio world.
Lisa, on the other side of that question, were there any bands that tried to sign with you that you turned down?
Oh, I guess that's not very nice. There was bands like JFA and stuff that I liked, but I didn't love them. You know what I mean? Like they were, like they just didn't push me over the edge into spending my own money on them. There was, those kind of fair to middle and kind of bubbling under bands.
I think that's fair.
But I'm trying to think who else. Like if anybody became big, like they, I was offered them. And they became like some giant thing, and probably my brain wiped it out. But
yeah,
there was, there was the, some of the bigger ones, like Reagan Youth weren't big, but it was Lucky's brother, and I'd be like, if I don't hear any tunes, like I don't care if I sell a bunch of records if it's not good. I mean, I don't want to just like put out records to make money because why?
Oh, you mean Wasted Youth?
Wasted Youth, not Reagan Youth, sorry, Wasted Youth. And I was just like, just didn't find him that compelling.
Right, the Reagan's In album by
yes,
Wasted Youth.
Exactly. And they were just kind of a rehash of everyone else.
That's funny. I'm writing that article with Daniel Weitzman right now, and he totally uses them as like his like standard answer for like generic hardcore band, like a stand-in. You
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
fuck authority, like Wasted Youth. He's so dismissive of them, and I'm like, hey, I like that song.
I can think of like a band. I guess you would call the Vandals big. I talked to Joe a bunch about, and I just found them too novelty-esque. I just didn't. I just wasn't buying their thing. It was like comedy or something like that, and I don't know. I could have done it. And it would have fit in on the roster.
For
like
the
very first one, whatever the ones with the green one with the helmet, whatever the hell it is. Can't remember.
Peace Through Vandalism.
Peace Through Vandalism, exactly. And I'd be like, I got TSOL. I don't need like comedy. It's just like, eh.
Yeah, that's actually the first record that Epitaph ever put out by a band that wasn't Bad Religion.
Oh, it was interesting.
Yeah. I had no idea until recently.
Right.
I was wondering, like, it seems like most punk labels, they start small and they'll put out like, 1,000, like 500 or 1,000 of their friends 7-inch, and then they'll do maybe 4 or 5 more 7-inches, and then they'll really, take a huge financial risk and put out an LP. And it's like you kind of came out of the gate doing almost entirely LPs.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, like, how come you didn't do it the other way and just start small and put out a lot of 7-inches?
That's a good question, because I don't know. It's like Danger House was so rad, you know what I mean? But there was a term on it. It was like, you know what I mean? It was like finite. It was like every single release is good, and then we're out. But I'll tell you why I don't put out 7-inches, because they're a total waste of money. No matter how rad they are, pay to come, no matter how good they are and how genius, it's just taking your money and throw it away, because you're super lucky if you get it back, but you probably won't. So I'd be like, just for a little bit more money, we can make a whole album, and all bands want to make an album instead of a 45. So I still I think we're only up to, after all these years, I think we're only up to 14. I should know my own discography numbers, but I don't. But very, very few singles.
Right.
And stores hate them. Like you can barely give them away. Like people do tons of singles for Record Store Day, and people just groan. And I can't believe how much they are either.
Well, nowadays it makes no sense, but I'm just talking about like the very early 80s.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to like go for the whole album and be like, just because it was my money. If I worked for Bomp, I'd be like, sure, let's put out a bunch of singles. I don't care. But I wanted to make an EP is another loss leader. Just spend the extra money, make an album.
Yeah. And I know like the Yes LA comp, you recreated what they had done, which is a one-sided 12-inch with a silk screened art on the other side, and it's a clear record so that you see it. If you put it down on the side with the grooves, you see the image forward, which is like, so who was it who thought of that in the first place? Because it's so like fourth dimensionally thinking,
I know, and it's so crazy, and it was just like so genius that they did it like that, because the whole project existed to make fun of that New York record called No New York.
Yep.
So they're like, we're going to do Yes LA, and we're just going to totally do this thing, and it'll be so hilarious. And I don't know if you've seen the photos, but when they silk screened it, they just had it all over their apartment. Like every surface had like a silk screen album, like all like the kitchen, all the floors, baseboards. So they had a silk screen machine, and they made very, very good use of it. And they wanted me to reissue it, and I just couldn't figure. I mean, I spent years agonizing over, not that you could do a one-sided record, but like who would silk screen it and who wouldn't screw it up and get paint in the grooves. And so, year after year went by, and I met these people from Wisconsin, and they were like, we're on this, just let us do it. So I did 1,000, and we did the exact same 4 colors as the original Yes LA. and they found everything. They found the piece of cardboard. Everything was as close as it could possibly be to the original. Even the gold foil stickers, like everything. Like they're like, we're going to make it just like that one. And I'd be like, cool, because who wants the lousy one with, where you didn't even try. But they silk screened it and the whole thing, and they make my stickers. They're super cool people. And they're called The Factory, like Andy Warhol. But anyway, they're at The Factory in Wisconsin.
Zach's band Retaliate just put out a one-sided 12-inch that on colored vinyl that has silk screened art on the other side of it.
Cool.
Who did that one, Zach?
Oh, I don't know. Mandel has a spot, like a silk screening spot somewhere in Orange County.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah, it's a super cool thing to do as long as the person doesn't get any paint on the other side.
Yeah. Lisa, did you ever meet Doug Moody? And if so, what were your impressions of him?
I never met him. He hates my fucking guts. And I have friends that are really good friends of his, and they visit him. I don't think he's in good shape anymore. Or not much anyway. But I have a really good friend, my friend Mike Vinegar in Chicago. He says I stole Suicidal from him because he has one track on some shitty comp. And I was like, I never even heard of the guy. I didn't know the comp was out. I still don't know what he's talking about, but he has this whole thing like he signed Suicide. I talked to Glenn about it. He's like, I was their manager. I don't know. What is Doug Moody talking about? Like they were never going to be on. I don't even know what's the name of the compilation, but it's a really bad Suicidal song. It doesn't even sound like they sound. Have you guys ever seen that video on YouTube of I forget what it's called. Somebody filmed Suicidal like really early on, and Mike has like super bleach blonde hair.
Yeah.
And it's
Dutch
not
television.
good at all. So it's a track from that era when they like basically just got together. So anyway, if you mention my name, Doug Moody apparently like has a stroke. So good for him.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. It's called Mystic Sampler. It's a cassette sampler from 1983, and the song is "I Saw Your Mommy."
Yeah, right. So anyway, his story is he had him signed, and I stole him away. And I'd be like, I didn't even know that comp existed for years. Like for years, I had no idea.
Yeah,
And Glenn would have never allowed them to put a record out on Mystic. Never.
Right.
Lisa, you gave us a great segue because I wanted to ask about Suicidal being on Miami Vice because I think you put that together, right?
Not really, no, but I haven't talked about it a lot, but the whole thing was extremely entertaining. Universal called me up and they said that they wanted to have the band on, and I was like, oh my God, that's so flattering. Oh my God. Because I watched Miami Vice. Stupid show, but I watched it. And I was like, oh my God, they would not pay to fly the band to Florida. I had to pay for it. There was no budget for that. They're like, well, if you want them to be on, because, they probably dealt with real record labels. Like I don't know how many indie bands are ever on there. So I bought me a ticket too, because again, I did not want Mike to like punch out anybody or the band to get in a fist fight or war. So Mike shows up at the airport. He's gotten in some gigantic fight at a party and he's fucking all punched out and he's on crutches. And I was like, what the like you have to be on TV doing your thing. And I don't know, he mumbled something like whatever. And so we go there and everybody on the show is shocked that he's on crutches and he's surly. The other guys are, they're pretty friendly or whatever, but he's not very helpful. So filming it was hilarious. There wasn't like young people, and we were at the Fontainebleau Hotel in classic Miami Beach. There was no young people. So I had to find young people and bust them in. And they were dressed super new wave. And I was like, oh God, those guys are going to shit when they see what people are dressed like. Cause they got their shoulder pads and everything. And Michael Mann would strike the whole set if he didn't like the color. That was like, they're in a nightclub. I don't know if I've ever seen the episode, but they're in a nightclub scene. He'd be like, that purple's the wrong color. And we'd have to sit there and wait for hours. And, the union guys would come and paint it and it'd be like the same purple. And it was just ridiculous. And then, so they go to costumes because they didn't put them in, they don't put you in costumes till right before you get and go on. So you don't get, makeup on it or whatever. And they're trying to put them in Miami Vice clothes. And I was like, oh no. I just was like, no, we're not doing any fucking no socks. So they just wore the clothes that they had on, and nobody was happy about it. But, I was like, they're happy to go if you guys, they're not going to be wearing any salmon colored or turquoise and salmon or no socks. Like, this is what you get. So, but it worked out okay in the end.
Why would they want suicidal if they don't look like suicidal?
Isn't that amazing? Like, what, why would you want them to dress like Don Johnson? It's like, oh, the band looks like the show. I don't think they even knew, somebody probably told them they should have them on because it didn't go with the scene. Like a band like that would not be playing in a Miami Beach. It was supposed to be one of those really nice nightclubs that people go to. It's like they would not be playing.
Yeah, it must have been someone trolling. It must have just been like some showrunner trolling, right? Like, let's see if we can.
It had to have been just like a fan or somebody's kid. Yeah, somebody's kid liked the song, or I didn't even know the genesis of how they picked it out, but I love that whatever we got to pay for the music was so unbelievably low. It didn't even cover the plane tickets. But anyway, everybody saw it. And then that that kept the song alive, and K-Rock, blah, blah, blah. So it was worth it. I probably spent between $5,000 and $10,000 to get everybody, because we were literally there for 48 hours. So they wouldn't pay for the hotels or anything. I couldn't put up 5 of those knuckleheads at the Fontainebleau. Even then, it was hundreds of dollars a night.
Did you get to be an extra?
I did get to be an extra. If you watch, I think it's, I might be wrong, but I think it's on YouTube. But I'm sure it's on the Peacock one way or the other. Whoever shows Miami Vice. It's about a dictator who comes to Florida and they find the dictator. Anyway, I was dead set against being an extra. In fact, I was just like, no. And they're like, we don't have enough people. So I have to act like I'm dancing to Suicidal. Hilarious.
We got to find you in Miami Vice, and we got to find you in line in Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke, and freeze frame it and use that as the next episode of 185 Miles South.
Yes. Up in Smoke was a blast. That was
can you talk about that? That's so cool.
They were looking for people. I never BTW. I never looked punk at all. I was like, my era of dressing up stupid was glam, and I did my whole glam thing. But I never tried to look punk, or I never had spiky hair or anything. I just looked like a power pop person or something. And anyway, they just needed extras to be in this scene outside of the Roxy. So they just put the word out. Maybe we had a flyer at Bomp. I don't know. But everybody was there, like the Mumps and the Screamers, any band, any girls that were going to be in the Pandoras, any Germs, so we're all there. And it just was because it was actually a quote unquote real movie. It wasn't like one take thing. It was really took a long time. So everybody wore their most groovy splendor of, Dayglow colors or people that look punky. So they just kept shooting it over and over. And there was this scene that you guys have to watch it. It's so bad. There's a scene where the bands are rocking. So don't come knocking. Yep. And we're all in line cheering them on because people are having sex in a band. And then they picked me and a few other people, a few other girls. We had to go upstairs, and we're in another scene that takes place, on the rocks, like the upstairs thing. And we're, I don't know, react to something that's going on that's stupid. And yeah. But anyway, we got paid the princely $35 or something. So that was the best.
But it was $35.78, so like $100.
It was, it was like $100. Yeah, and considering how many people there were, that was a lot of $35.
Right.
But it was so bad. Oh my God! When we saw the whole movie, we're like, "This is a word." I mean, of course, we hate Cheech and Chong. I hate drugs. I'm not Ben, but I hate drugs. And I was like, "Oh my God, Cheech and Chong is." It was just more terrible than you could ever possibly imagine, which made it excellent.
I feel so attacked on this pod. First, we're going to go in on Agnostic Front. Now we got to go in on Up in Smoke. 2 of my favorite things ever.
Oh, my God. Yeah, but you got to watch that scene because you can see, Screamer, every single person. Probably Don Bowles is in there, for God's sake. I mean, everybody's in that scene.
You act like I haven't watched it in the last year. It's a
Oh,
beautiful thing. I love that movie. It's one of my favorites ever.
yeah, we should watch it on Twitch, and I'll be like, that's Lancelot, and that's whatever, and whomever, and stuff like that. So, and Cheech and Chong, they were super nice guys. They would come around and make sure everybody was happy and shake hands with you, like they weren't dicks or anything, but we're just like, marijuana, the worst. But everybody I know now is all super dope head and, whatever. So good for them.
Yeah. Were there any teetotalers in the early LA punk scene besides yourself?
Oh, I wasn't a teetotaler. I just hated drugs.
Okay.
I drank. Right. I drank, but I never took drugs. I hated drugs. I've never done coke or anything. Like, absolutely hate drugs because my sisters were big druggies. And I was like, I never want to be like them because drugs are gross. But
right.
Just the whole marijuana hippie thing and like marijuana leaves, like, no.
Yeah. Tell us, flashing forward to the 2010s, you started a distro with the owner of Beer City Records.
Yes, because
how'd that come about?
I'm sure you guys have heard of Mordam if you buy records. Mordam was just going gangbusters forever, ever since they started. Ruth, I met Ruth. She used to work at Rough Trade, like, I don't know, super early 80s. And she would always say no to my label. And why? Because if anybody was on a major label, you wouldn't be on Mordam because they were so like lefties. And then Lookout left, and then they were like half of their money was gone all of a sudden. And then they would be like, oh, okay, we'll take your label. But anyway, being with Mordam was great. It wasn't a long time, maybe 5 years. They went down. She sold it to a guy. What was his name? Seth something. I block it out because I hate him so much. And so he promptly failed. The employees took it over. They failed. So after like getting stiffed like 3 times in a row within 6 years, me and Mike are like, forget it. We're just going to start our own ILD thing. We're just going to do our own thing. So we grabbed up a lot of the labels that used to be with Mordam, like Sympathy and Dionysus. And we lost a lot too. A lot of people didn't want to be with somebody as small as us, but we're still here and we don't get stiffed anymore.
And what's the name of the distro?
Independent Label Distribution, and it's based in Milwaukee. And Mike still does Beer City, so he's Mr. Punk Rock guy. I'm sure he's wearing shorts right now. I'm sure there's like 50 feet of snow on the ground, and he will not wear long legs. It's not cold enough for long pants.
That reminds me of that's like how I was when I was 12. Like, right. I'd wait till like the coldest day in winter and be like, okay, fine, I'll wear long pants.
Yeah. Only because I'm dying. But Mike is like, it's not any colder. And I'd be like, Mike, it's 30 below zero. Like your eyes freeze when you go outside. And it's not cold.
So you have never met him in real life. You've never been in the same room as him.
I've never met him, which is probably why we get along. But I hear Milwaukee's a real rad town, but just never, we talk on the phone every single day. And I was like, one day I'm just going to go in there and like be like, you're fired or something, but just surprise him.
Would he even know it was you?
Oh, I'm sure he's seen photos of me on the internet. But
it's just, I think about that every day. It's like you co-own a company that's been like almost 10 years, right?
Yeah, like 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I never wanted any partners in Frontier because I'm so hard to get. I'm so unbelievably stubborn and unreasonable. I never wanted to have partners because I don't want to have to go back and forth. Like I just want everything to be my way or the highway. So Mike and I actually have to like listen to each other and decide. And he's a total hard ass. Like he's an Armenian, so the answer is always no. So I'm not ever like the good cop. But I become the good cop because the answer is always no. Like, Mike, this guy wants to know, can you have an extra 30 days? No. What does this look like? No, we're not giving him an extra 30 days. This is what, so I was like, okay. So I always go back to him. I talked to Mike and the answer is no.
Right.
Lisa, obviously you have stuff going on still, but with the label being 40 years old, can you talk about where you see the legacy of Frontier Records being in like the history of punk and hardcore?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, because it's weird. For some reason, I'm not in that whatever, like the reverence for Discord or SST. Like just kind of not in that stratosphere, no matter what I do. So I don't know what the legacy is.
Do you think that's
people
because
know the name, and I think there's some respect there and stuff, but I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like alternative tentacles. These are like the tabernacles of things, and I just don't feel like I'm up in that lofty stratosphere of the way people look at things. Or conversely, people think that I put out everything. Like, you put out Black Flag, right? And like Dead Kennedys, right? And I'd be like, no, I didn't put out any of that stuff. I'm like, oh, what did you put out? Oh, I didn't like them.
I think maybe it's because you weren't in a band. Like every record label you named was started by a person in a popular band.
That's
so they were already like a kind of a public face, public figure.
Right. And I have always steadfastly stayed out of the limelight because I don't want to be, you know what I mean? I'm not the point, so I never was any kind of attention seeker. Not that I'm talking about Curtis and Tang or people like that. Yeah. But did you get that bit of shade? Did everybody get that bit of shade? But I never really had a high profile, so I don't think people probably know my name or anything like that, which is fine.
But part of that might also come off of what you learned from the approach of the posh boy guy, right?
Yeah.
You'd be able to benefit from that.
Yeah, I don't ever want to be uncool to people ever. I mean, I have been, but I mean, I don't want to be that person on purpose where you just think that you know better than they do. It's like, I don't, however they play the song sounds great. I just want to make it sound good. I don't need to tell them to do something like play it different, play a different tune, do a different tuning. Like, I don't do any of that.
Right. Do you have records coming out that we can look forward to on Frontier?
Let's see. Oh, I've been reissuing a lot of stuff by a band called the Lilies, which is a shoegazy kind of band that I like a lot. And so I've re-released 2. These are super early 90s. So there's one called The Brief History of Amazing Letdowns. That's coming out in February. And there's a local band that Ben may have heard of called the Flatworms that I absolutely love. Have you heard of them?
I know. I've heard of them through you because you told me you're going to put out the record. Yeah.
Super rockin'. One of the guys is in the OCs. So he's on tour like 365, but they're just unbelievably rockin' band, like super good. Sounds like Wire 154, only like 5 times faster. And, wow. But they hardly ever play. Like, they play in LA, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a year, minus COVID. But so anyway, I have a live record ready to go with those guys that Ty Segall recorded. And there's going to be a double version of Only Theater of Pain that goes into a box set with a book of Ed Culver photos. I'm only doing the LP part. I have nothing to do with the book because I don't need the trouble of books. That's just like a whole another layer of hell. And what else? Oh, we're going to do the aforementioned, the Adolescents thing with Tony Different vocals. We're going to do some kind of different version of the Blue album.
Right on.
Tony is talking. He really wants to do a box set of singles, so he might do something like that with like a booklet-y bit. So,
awesome.
But it'll be called Soto. It's not even going to be called. We'll just take the artwork instead of saying Adolescents on it. Just going to say Soto, like in that font, kind of thing.
Right.
And people that are cool will know what it is, and other people won't know what it is.
They'll learn.
They'll learn. They'll be like, "Oh, shit, I didn't buy that. I didn't know what it was."
Yeah. Lisa, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
I know I have. It's like 1 hour of Netflix that I have not watched today.
I know.
I'm so sick of this shutdown. Oh my God. I just want to go out and see a show. But anyway, here we are.
I know.
But yeah, that was fun. I love talking about myself. I don't have to think about anything like, I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, do you want to ask the final question since this is the first time you've helped me out?
Lisa, do you feel well represented?
Well represented by what?
In this interview, do you feel like you've represented?
No. Yeah, they were good ones. It was kind of a good overview. We didn't talk about, what I consider my legacy stuff, like Thin White Rope, but Ben has always been resistant. Anyway, Thin White Rope is probably one of my favorite records I ever put out. And they don't sell a lot, but they're just super important to me musically. So I reissued those, digitally remastered. And you know what? It's really taken off. Like, not like punk rock does, but like people are like, we sell like all 5 of their studio records all the time. Like I'll just open my email and somebody bought all 5 that day. It's really weird. Just like a slow build. So that's cool.
That rules.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Anytime. It was nice to meet you.